My Aunt Anya was a mysterious woman with a balloon obsession. She marveled over the inflatable objects so much that the woman had collections of unopened packets laying around in her home. Anya wasn't a clown of some kind. She was generally fond of the balloon, which somehow made her even more creepy than the average clown. Being her nephew wasn't so fun. She always gave me the creeps in general. Her hoarding balloons just added to how I felt about her. Her bi-monthly gifts of balloons were often not appreciated, especially considering the fact that I told her so frequently to please stop giving me balloons. An 18-year-old male does not need so many damn balloons. Yet, that didn't stop the stubborn woman when I turned 20. And it wouldn't when I turned 21 or 25 or heck, even now, at 30. It wouldn't stop until the woman was unable to send them. She once explained her persistent gifts with, "Balloons are friends, Alex. I will never stop giving you friends. They're more loyal than the average human friend. They'll stay with you until they no longer float." And then so I asked her, "And Anya, is that why you bury them?" She nodded. A sad look crossed her face. So many lost friends, so many corpses. Just recalling the conversation makes me shiver a little. Anyway, when she died, I, her only nephew, inherited all of her belongings. I got the deed to her house along with all the fucking balloons. The house itself was nice, but all that clutter was a bit too much to handle. What did I do? Well, anything a sane, non-balloon, obsessed hoarder would do. Get rid of all those balloons. My first week living in my aunt's house, I had at least 3 large trash bags worth of popped or deflated balloons from the first floor alone. And I'm assuming she didn't have time to bury them all once her body started to deteriorate, but still. Not one balloon was thrown in the trash. A heap of her balloon corpses were found on the bed in the guest room, awaiting to be buried in the backyard. And I laughed when I saw the guest room. "Aunt Anya," I asked nobody, talking to myself really, "why?" And a faint answer came to me. Nothing clear or coherent in the slightest. It was too far away to be understood. Thinking that it was all in my mind, I shrugged it off and continued my task of throwing all the clutter away. The night I had finished the cleanup, the first dream of many came to me. Aunt Anya was sitting in her comfy blue recliner, staring directly at me. The look on her face was both of disgust and disappointment, as if I had done something despicable. "Bodies don't belong in the trash," she scolded. "You disrespect my friends. You disrespect me. Don't disrespect the dead, Alex." The dreams continued until I caved and started to bury the friends that I didn't throw away. My girlfriend said I was being ridiculous, but somehow burying them appeased my dream aunt. Granted, my aunt didn't disappear from my dreams, but it did change how she talked to me. The more I respected the popped or deflated balloons like she did, the more Aunt Anya would say less creepy shit. It was as if she now understood that it creeped me out, and it changed the aspects of her that always unnerved me. The dream started to worsen once I had to get rid of the packaged balloons. To appease Anya, whether it was my subconscious acting as my aunt or her spirit, I decided to bury the unused balloons instead of throwing them out. The following dream I only had once. "Alex," she said, disapprovingly, "we don't bury the living, but we don't bury our friends alive." Those words were enough to wake me in a cold sweat. I looked at the clock to see that it was 3 in the morning. Christ, I swore, putting on a jacket and shoes to dig up what I had buried several hours ago. I soon brought in the unused packages and plopped them down on the kitchen counter. Shaken up, I headed up the stairs. Before I could leave the living room, I heard a familiar voice behind me said, as clear as day, "Good night." I turned around immediately, expecting to see my aunt. I saw the empty blue recliner she used to sit in. Needless to say, I slept in a hotel room that night, and I dreamt of nothing. To solve the issue of decluttering the house on my terms in the dreams, I decided to spend the night at my girlfriend's where the dreams could not reach me for some reason. This made the cleanup a lot easier. I didn't bother to unearth what I had already buried, but I did start throwing any balloon I came across, dead or living, in the garbage. Eventually, all was cleaned except the basement. I was saving the basement for last because 1, it was creepy, and 2, I just had a bad feeling about going down there. I'd only been down there once when my aunt was still alive. The woman had chewed me out when she found me there. Perhaps her rule of never going into the basement still had leverage over me. But considering she was dead, I reasoned it no longer mattered. As soon as I entered the basement, I noticed how heavy and humid the air was. I would have disregarded it as the basement being musty if it wasn't for the smell. Or, to put it correctly, the actual lack of smell. The basement did not have that musty smell. It didn't have any odor. It had no scent. Cautiously, I descended the basement stairs. The second thing I noticed was the lack of balloons. It was relatively clean. Only boxes of unused furniture were stored in the main room. No wonder there was so much clutter upstairs. She didn't keep her friends downstairs at all because they were her guests. When I noticed the door across the room, the wrongness grew within me. My gut was screaming at me to go back upstairs, but my stubbornness and curiosity was much stronger. Forcing myself to the door, I inhaled and exhaled while I repeated the mantra, "It's all in your head. It's all in your head," until my hand rested on the cold door handle. With pulling off a band-aid, I swung the door open. And what I found will always haunt me. The room was filled wall to wall with pictures of missing people. Satanic symbols and hexes were plastered in black ink on the walls and ceiling. What appeared to be a summoning circle of some sort. I don't know what it is exactly, but it was drawn on the ground in a dark red substance. In the center was a box labeled, "My Special Friends." I didn't even bother to look. I could smell the decaying flesh from where I stood. It was nauseating. Once I was able to move, I ran upstairs, out of the house, and I called the cops. The police later told me that the box was full of deflated balloons covered in human flesh from the missing people's faces. They also found a hidden trapdoor where more human remains were recovered. More remains along with torn masks of faces were found buried along with balloons. Turns out, my aunt had killed these people. And there were so many people. The thing that gets me the most, and what I can't seem to wrap my head around, is the fact that these victims were not only from local missing people. A lot of the unrecognizable bodies were later identified as missing people from all around the world. There was a big problem with that. How could my aunt, 100-pound frail woman, who never traveled out of the country, kidnap and kill someone who was last seen in a foreign country? Well, some questions are best left unanswered, and for now, I kind of prefer to keep it a mystery. The house is dark when the first beam of sunlight lights at the edge of the horizon. The house is silent as the last slivers of moonlight flee the spread of warmth. Yet the house is not still. A huddled figure remains, left behind to linger uncertainly in her despair. She is crouched low to the ground and moving with jerking, rigid motions. The woman scuttles up and down the hallway, knuckles white as she grips that dark rag. Her movements are desperate, breath heavy with fear and adrenaline. And even as the minutes trickle steadily by, May cannot bring herself to stop. Lead sprawled out behind her now, sweat dribbling down her brow. The woman drags that cloth back and forth, to and fro. The suds blossom outwards with each rugged swipe, soaking the floorboards and the edge of her skirt with every movement. She barely seems to notice the irritating thudding of that grandfather clock, and hardly seems to even care. Those dark eyes are completely fixated at the task at hand, desperation licking at her terse expression. The woman continues her rugged scrubbing, frustration mounting. It's not enough. It's still not enough. May knows all too well what's at stake. What will happen if she fails to erase that damned stain? Even if nobody else can see it, even if she's the only one that understands, May cannot forget the implications of leaving such a horrid scar behind. The movements become more desperate, soaking the floorboards and leaving both hands raw from exertion. And then, as abruptly as the sudden panicked cleaning frenzy had begun, the woman suddenly stops. A rotten hunk of despair coils deep inside of her chest cavity, hands trembling uncontrollably, soapy rag tumbling from her grip. Breath still heavy, shoulders hunched, the woman stares speechlessly down the hallway. The house is barely lit by the faintest touch of dawn's gentle hues, leaving much more to the imagination than it truly reveals. And yet, the woman continues to stare into that nothingness, frozen to the spot as the trickling puddle blooms slowly outwards. The house is silent, save for each hitching breath and that damned ticking of the clock. It ought to be peaceful, soothing the anxious beast lurking just beneath the surface, but no, isn't there something else to do? May wants nothing more than to ignore it, but the growing realization spreads its tendrils through her very soul. A faint vibration sending tremors through the floorboards and shaking her from head to toe. Every movement shakes her very essence, each cautious footfall leaving stabbing needles prickling through the back of her eyes. Meg doesn't dare move an inch. Dark eyes brimming with unease and irritation as the sensation continues to grow steadily stronger still. When the sound finally splits the silence, she almost misses it. At first, it's only a very faint scratching. Tiny paws with even smaller nails, caressing the walls with each gentle click. Anyone else might have lost the sound amid the creaking of the settling house, or not cared enough to even bother listening in the first place. But May isn't anyone else. She can't ignore this any more than she could ignore the mess plaguing her precious home. The woman jerks abruptly to her feet, jaw clenched and tremors subsiding. The more she fixates at the intruder's cautious movements, the more it nibbles away at her very last nerves. The first step is instinctive, accidentally dipping a sock into the suds and leaving her recoiling in disgust. But the second step is much more meaningful, creeping cautiously toward the source of such a horrid sound. May abandons her work, inching further along that dim hallway with every repeated scratching noise. The path is gradual, hesitant but persistent. She moves as though by instinct, barely daring to consider what awaits her at the end. It's not until her nose brushes the door, lurking at the very end of the hall, half obscured by the last remnants of the night's lingering embrace, that the woman finally jerks to a stop once again. Movements no longer subconscious, autopilot disengaged. May stands there, rigid, unable to bring herself to break the safety of her inactivity. Her throat burns at the very idea of breaching this precious routine of hers, of opening the gateway to something dreadful and ruining it all. She shouldn't be here. She should be scrubbing away that damn stain, not lurking here in front of the cursed doorway. May swallows thickly, glances just over her shoulder at the waiting cleaning supplies already calling out for her gentle touch. And the continuous scratching suddenly cuts off. The relief is short-lived, however, when something heavy jerks suddenly, landing with an unbearable muffled thud. The unexpected sound is enough to jolt May from her daze, causing her to stumble sharply backwards. A tremor curls through her toes, causing her to squeeze her eyes shut against the anticipation of what may be awaiting her just past those shiny new locks. And yet, she still fumbles quickly for the curved doorknob, breath hitching with every pulsating heartbeat that spears through her skull. She can scarcely bring herself to turn the knob. Somehow, May manages to find the nerve to fling open that door, shoving it away from her as though it were dripping with germs. Like ripping off a Band-Aid, she rushes to get it over with. The door smacks the opposite wall from the force of her desperation, thence the opposing wall, and swings back around as though to strike her for such defiance. But even as quickly as it rushes back, the door is nowhere near fast enough to obscure May's vision. And oh God, the closet awaiting her is cramped, barely wide enough to house the boxes of clothes left behind. The light bulb overhead has burned out ages ago, long forgotten by a woman with far too long a list of to-dos. The stench of mothballs and dried urine is overwhelming, each inhale bringing with it even stronger waves of disgust. But May barely seems to notice any of this disgusting display, eyes drawn instead to the huddled form lingering at the very back of the room. One might have missed the frail form lurking behind one of the many cardboard boxes had it not been for the gradual shifting movements and the soft squeaks. The long fur obscures most of its features, body taut and pale with nails unbearably overgrown. The rodent skitters once more, digging its claws into the plaster with a repeated scraping sound. May inhales sharply. The rodent stops, turns slowly to stare with beady little eyes. A faint flicker of recognition almost seems to dawn as it starts to move towards her. But May is much faster, jolting forward to retrieve the door just before it could bounce once more. She slams the door back shut, breath hitching worse than ever before when she fumbles for the locks. The creature already begins to wail as it protests, snout snuffling and tiny paws fumbling at the door frame. May shrieks, throwing her full weight backwards in her desperation to track the beast back inside the closet where he belongs. She doesn't even remember the tears brimming, but already they obscure her vision and leave her gasping breathlessly. By some miracle, the squealing gradually subsides. May can't stop shaking when she finally manages to pull that final lock snugly back into place, taking a faltering step backwards. And the house is silent once more, as the final rays of sunlight light up the hallway and reveal each hidden corner of her beloved home. May hesitates for a moment longer before cautiously retreating to her corner of soap puddles and horrible stains. Kneeling, she fumbles for the abandoned rag and begins to scrub her bitter tears into the mix. As sun sears the sky above, only to dip back down and melt into the rapidly dimming horizon, the cycle continues without fail, only the faintest hint of how much time has passed shining through that glimmer of moon. Up and down it goes, streaking across the sky as the Godfather clock marches steadily onwards, never ceasing, always flowing. She couldn't stop it even if she wanted to. May could no longer tell how much time had passed, her palms red and raw from the bleach, and all she knows is that the creature has gotten much bigger now, and its irritable scratching so much louder. The sounds tear through her eardrums, flooding the hall with its excessive racket. She can no longer stand it, tears welling as she shakes her head back and forth violently. No, no, no. Wasn't supposed to be like this. He was never. Memories now dancing by in horrid rhythms. The woman suddenly fumbles with that bottle. It pitches forward, just missing the brush with her mostly chewed fingernails. The bleach clatters noiselessly as it gushes out over the worn floorboards, seeping into a stain that still will go away. May hesitates, breath hitching as she gazes down at the mess. The burning stench burrows in through her nostrils, makes a home there among the nub of irritation left by such horrid racket. She almost finds herself reaching for the bottle before she catches herself and withdraws again with a sharp huff. And instead, her eyes jolt sharply back to the door once more. lingering at the end of the hall. May swallows, draws back both arms to hug herself tightly. The sound still won't cease. The creature is ramming his weight against the door now, straining against the hinges and those shiny new locks, squealing all the while, scrabbling and hissing as he claws away at the door frame. Teeth gnash and drool sputters. The damn thing just won't give up. He won't stop until she's gone completely out of her skull. May shudders violently, the ice suddenly racing through her pulsating veins, leaving her reeling. The bitter realization that melts in her mouth leaves remnants of its horrid, coppery flavor. She gags silently, even as her mind starts to race. She can't stand tearing her gaze away any longer. It's far quicker to cross the household than arrive trembling in front of that door. The pounding becomes louder still, blending with her frantically racing heartbeat and reaching a terrifying crescendo. May only falters once she reaches that dreaded doorway, sweat slicked hands sliding off the doorknob and resting uneasily by her side. Those wide eyes flicker to one side, catching a glimpse of the dark shape lurking nearby. She stares motionlessly at the waiting umbrella stand, dark wood cradling only a long-forgotten, inverted umbrella. And May can't even recall the last time she even needed to use it. The last time she saw any hint of rain in those dark clouds lurking overhead. She can't even remember the last time she went outside at all. May swallows hard once again. This time, she moves sharply before she has time to regret such brashness. She plunges her hand into the umbrella stand, tightening pale fingers around the base of that sad, crumpled umbrella. Even as she tugs it out of the stand, May is already holding it close to her chest as though the damn thing could protect her from such horrors. She inches closer to the doorway once more, eyes darting back and forth in an agitated fashion. One step. She sucks in a heavy, deep breath. 2 steps. The hand falters just before the locks. 3 steps. A bead of sweat trickles down as she pushes herself onwards. 4 steps. She pushes through the chill settling just beneath her skin and twists the doorknob sharply enough to make her bleach-seared skin sing. 5 steps. She finally sees it. The cramped closet awaiting her gaze is silent and still. May's grip falters slightly, a nauseous blend of hope and despair flooding her lungs and leaving her gasping quietly as she sweeps her gaze around the empty room. No furry beast lurks there, ready to pounce. No drooling, bloodied mass is there to scream profanities and wail mercilessly. No dark, beady eyes hover in the shadows just behind the cardboard boxes. The closet is just as still and silent as the rest of the dark house looming over her, sucking in every ounce of air as she looks frantically about. There must be something she's missing here, something May doesn't see the figure huddled just on the other side of that slowly creaking door. She doesn't hear their heavy breaths, nor the resounding pulse that fills the stiff air. She does, however, feel the sudden sharp blow as the door cracks sharply back around and catches her in the side of her skull. May cries out, stumbling backwards and letting the umbrella go flying back into the dark abyss waiting just behind her. And then he's upon her, May shrieks, batting away the mass of fur and teeth as he rushes forward and tackles her to the floorboards. They creak in protest from the sudden weight, interrupted only by the terrified screams of the flailing woman and her snarling assistant. May squirms about in a desperate attempt to dodge the snapping jaws, but the rodent still manages to find purchase just above her shoulder. He bites down hard, teeth melting through frail skin and digging deep into the tangled muscle lurking just below the surface. May shrieks again, kicking both her legs and bucking her hips, trying frantically to throw the beast off. He resists her efforts, snarling and hissing, spraying her with saliva and blood as his jaw clenches and releases. The beast begins to gnaw at her exposed flesh, tearing and gouging as he burrows deeper and deeper still. The pain tears blur her senses, leaves her sputtering and choking, even as she claws one hand against the creature's naked side. The dark streaks stain the vulnerable flesh, causes the beast to shriek back at her in protest. Even when the creature sinks his teeth in deeper through sheer protest, May only lashes out with her other hand and catches him just above one of his beady eyes. The creature recoils, only slightly. Still, that's just enough for May to scramble upwards and shove the beast off to one side. The creature yelps in confusion and anger, shaking his hairy head as his nails skitter against the floorboards. Before he could get a chance to gather his bearings, though, the desperate woman drags herself back to her feet and lunges forward. She stumbles straight into the towering grandfather clock, causing it to rock violently against the wall. May reaches up and grasps the side to steady herself. Already, the beast is recovering, screaming in rage as he barrels back towards her. May wails a desperate shriek as she tugs at the clock, sends it tumbling loudly downwards and straight into the charging beast. The massive claw crashes down hard, catching the creature almost exactly where May had successfully clawed him across the face. They both go down hard enough to shake the very foundation of that tiny house, leaving the beast temporarily dazed. And May doesn't give him the opportunity to recover again, shrieking like a banshee as she throws herself back at the duo. She lands heavily on top of the grandfather clock. She brings both hands down to pounds again and again. The creature gags, barely audible just under the cracking, creaking that fills the air. His dark eyes dart to and fro, pupils mere pinpricks as it struggles to find something to focus on. Eventually, they manage to land on the panicked woman still trying to crush him under the clock's unbearable weight. The creature sputters, weeps, and gasps out but a single whimpering phrase. "Mama. Please, I'm sorry, May hesitates. A flicker of emotion interrupting those bloodshot eyes as she gazes down at the beast. A frail form lays sprawled beneath her, dark hair obscuring his face. The body is smeared in blood and dirt, dripping sweat and various other disgusting liquids. The figure squirms again, a few dark strands drifting aside and revealing a speck of frightened blue hue. That's enough to drive the woman right over the edge. The stain lurking near the entrance of her beloved house, the stench lingering in that closet at the end of the hall. So many years of unbearable mess and unforgivable disobedience. The tears welling in those dark eyes dribble down her sweat-slicked brow before at least they begin to shrivel and dry. May gazes down at the huddled figure, the lingering blur melting the senses and leaving a smear where the boy had once lain. And once more, she sees the rodent lurking in his place, and an unbearable rage overwhelms her senses. A wordless scream erupts from her lungs as the woman slams her weight into the grandfather clock over and over. Legs spasm with every blow, gurgling shrieks splitting the night and interrupts those last attempts of desperate protest. Each time she slams the clock down, the splintering of bone fills her with a sense of relief, a dawning knowledge that leaves her almost euphoric. A faint giggle rises through her chest, flooding out through her mouth until it leaves her wheezing and inconsolable. The creature, lying broken beneath the clock, is silent, unresponsive to her hysterical laughter. May doesn't dare to move at first, gazing at the damage. Only then does she struggle back to her feet, leaving the bloodied mass of bone and flesh behind as she drifts back to that spilt bottle of bleach. Faint smile still tugging at her lips, she kneels and resumes scrubbing away at the lingering stain, even though her chest tightens at the knowledge that this next stain will be far more difficult to erase. It was so much bigger than the last one, after all.